Good morning and welcome to Reading Wikis for You, where we read the Wikipedia articles for you. We don't editorialize, we don't give our opinions on the articles, we just read the articles word for word as they were at the time of recording. Now, this video is for the 12th of September 2005, where we're going to be reading about the HMS Terror from 1813. Now, before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can get new videos as they come out. But most importantly, at any point in the video, put a comment down below what article you'd like us to read next. So, with that out of the way, let's get started. HMS Terror was a specialized warship and a newly developed bomb vessel constructed for the Royal Navy in 1813. She participated in several battles of the War of 1812, including the Battle of Baltimore with the bombardment of Fort McHenry. She was converted into a polar exploration ship 2 decades later and participated in George Back's Arctic expedition of 1836 to 1837. The successful Ross expedition to the Antarctic of 1839 to 1843, and Sir John Franklin's ill-fated attempt to force the Northwest Passage in 1845, during which she was lost with all hands along with HMS Erebus. On 12 September 2016, the Arctic Research Foundation announced that the wreck of the Terror had been found in Nunavut's Terror Bay off the southwest coast of King William Island. The wreck was discovered 92 kilometers, or 57 miles, south of the location where the ship was reported abandoned, and some 50 kilometers, or 31 miles, from the wreck of HMS Erebus, discovered in September 2014. Early history and military service. HMS Terror was a Vesuvius-class bomb ship built over 2 years at the Davy Shipyard in Topsham in South Devon for the Royal Navy. Her deck was 31 meters long, and the ship measured 325 tons burthen. The vessel was armed with 2 heavy mortars and 10 cannon and was launched in June 1813. Terror saw service in the War of 1812 against the United States, during which the ships of the North America and West Indies Station of the Royal Navy blockaded the Atlantic ports of the United States and launched amphibious raids from its base in Bermuda leading up to the 1814 Chesapeake Campaign, a punitive expedition that included the raid on Alexandria, the Battle of Bladensburg, and the burning of Washington. Under the command of John Sheridan, she took part in the bombardment of Stonington, Connecticut on 9 to 12 August 1814. She also fought in the Battle of Baltimore in September 1814 and participated in the bombardment of Fort McHenry. The later attack inspired Francis Scott Key to write the poem that eventually became known as the Star-Spangled Banner. In January 1815, still under Sheridan's command, Terror was involved in the Battle of Fort Peter and the attack on St. Mary's, Georgia. After the war, Terror was laid up until March 1828, when she was recommissioned for service in the Mediterranean Sea. She was removed from active service when she underwent repairs for damage suffered near Lisbon, Portugal. Early polar exploration service. In the mid-1830s, Terror was refitted as a polar exploration vessel. Her design as a bomb ship meant she had an unusually strong framework to resist the recoil of her heavy mortars. Thus, it was presumed she could withstand the pressure of polar sea ice as well. Back expedition. In 1836, command of Terror was given to Captain George Back for an Arctic expedition to Hudson Bay. The expedition aimed to enter Repulse Bay, where it would send out landing parties to ascertain whether the Boothia Peninsula was an island or a peninsula. Terror was trapped by ice near Southampton Island and did not reach Repulse Bay. At one point, the ice forced her 12 meters up the face of a cliff. She was trapped in the ice for 10 months. In the spring of 1837, an encounter with an iceberg further damaged the ship. She nearly sank on her return journey across the Atlantic and was in a sinking condition by the time Back sailed her into Lough Swilly before beaching her at Rathmullen Company, Donegal, Ireland, on 21 September. The Admiralty dispatched the shipwright William McPherson Rice to refloat and repair Terror sufficiently to enable her to sail to the naval shipyard at Chatham in Kent, where full repairs were carried out. Correspondence describing the repairs and the crew's sojourn in Rathmullen are held in the Royal Museum's Greenwich collection. Back subsequently published a complete account of this voyage right up to the decommissioning of Terror in Chatham. Ross Expedition. In 1839, Terror was assigned to a voyage in the Antarctic along with Erebus under the overall command of James Clark Ross. Francis Crozier was commander of the Terror on this expedition, as well as second in command to Ross. The expedition spanned 3 seasons from 1840 to 1843, during which Terror and Erebus made 3 forays into Antarctic waters, traversing the Ross Sea twice and sailing through the Weddell Sea southeast of the Falkland Islands. The extinct volcano Mount Terror on Ross Island was named after the ship by the expedition commander. Franklin Expedition. Before leaving on the Franklin Expedition, both Erebus and Terror underwent heavy modifications for the journey. They were both outfitted with steam engines consisting of former London and Greenwich Railway steam locomotives rated at 25 horsepower each, could propel its ship at 4 knots. The pair of ships were among the first Royal Navy ships to have steam-powered engines and screw propellers. 12 days' supply of coal was carried. Iron plating was added fore and aft on the ship's hulls to make them more resistant to pack ice, and their decks were cross-planked to distribute impact forces. Along with Erebus, Terror was stocked with supplies for their expedition, which included, among other items, 2 tons of tobacco, 8,000 tins of preserves, and 7,560 liters of liquor. Terror's library had 1,200 books, and the ship's berths were heated via ducts that connected them to the stove. Their voyage to the Arctic was with Sir John Franklin in overall command of the expedition in Erebus, and Terror again under the command of Captain Francis Crozier. The expedition was ordered to gather magnetic data in the Arctic archipelago and complete a crossing of the Northwest Passage, which had already been charted from both the east and west, but never entirely navigated. It was planned to last 3 years. The expedition sailed from Greenhithe, Kent, on 19 May 1845, and the ships were last seen entering Baffin Bay in August 1845. The disappearance of the Franklin expedition set off a massive search effort in the Arctic, and the broad circumstances of the expedition's fate were revealed during a series of expeditions between 1848 and 1866. Both ships had become icebound and were abandoned by their crews, all of whom died of exposure and starvation while trying to trek overland to Fort Resolution, a Hudson's Bay Company outpost, 970 kilometers to the southwest. Subsequent expeditions up until the late 1980s, including autopsies of crew members, revealed their canned rations may have been tainted by both lead and botulism. Oral reports by local Inuit that some of the crew members resorted to cannibalism are supported by evidence of cut marks and pot polish on the skeletal remains of crew members found on King William Island during the late 20th century. Discovery of the wreckage. On 15 August 2008, Parks Canada, an agency of the Government of Canada, announced a 75,000 Canadian dollar 6-week search deploying the icebreaker CCGS Sir Wilfrid Laurier with the goal of finding the 2 ships. The search was also intended to strengthen Canada's claims of sovereignty over large portions of the Arctic. Attempts were also undertaken in 2010, 2011, and 2012, all of which failed to locate the ship's remains. On 8 September 2014, it was announced that the wreckage of one of Franklin's ships was found on 7th of September using a remotely operated underwater vehicle, recently acquired by Parks Canada. On 1 October 2014, Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper announced that the remains were that of Erebus. On 12 September 2016, a team from the Arctic Research Foundation announced that a wreck close to Terror's description had been located on the southern coast of King William Island in the middle of Terror Bay, at a depth of 69 to 79 feet. The remains of the ships are designated a National Historic Site of Canada, with the exact location withheld to preserve the wrecks and prevent looting. Sammy Kogvik, an Inuk hunter, and member of the Canadian Rangers, who joined the crew of the Arctic Research Foundation's Martin Bergman, recalled an incident from 7 years earlier in which he encountered what appeared to be a mast jutting from the ice. With this information, the ship's designation was changed from Cambridge Bay to Terror Bay, where researchers located the wreck in just 2.5 hours. According to Louis Kamukuk, a resident of nearby Gajoa Haven and a historian on the Franklin expedition, Parks Canada had ignored the stories of locals that suggested that the wreck of Terror was in her namesake bay, despite many modern stories of sightings by hunters and from airplanes. The wreck was found in excellent condition, her decks and interior spaces largely intact. A wide exhaust pipe that rose from the outer deck was pivotal in identifying the ship. It was located in the same location where the smokestack from Terror's locomotive engine had been installed. The wreck was nearly 100 kilometers south of where historians thought her final resting place was, calling into question the previously accepted account of the fate of the sailors, that they died while trying to walk out of the Arctic to the nearest Hudson's Bay Company trading post. The location of the wreckage and evidence in the wreckage of anchor usage indicates continued use, raising the possibility that some of the sailors had attempted to reman the ship and sail her home, or elsewhere, possibly on orders from Crozier. On 23 October 2017, it was announced by British Defence Minister Sir Michael Fallon that the British government would be giving Terror and Erebus to Canada, retaining only a few relics and any gold, along with the right to repatriate any human remains. In 2018, Terror and Erebus were gifted to Canada and the Inuit in care of the Inuit Heritage Trust by the Government of the United Kingdom. This includes all the remaining artifacts. Although the exact location has not been released, Nancy Anilniak, the field unit superintendent of the Nunavut Field Unit, has restricted access to an approximately 10 kilometer by 5 kilometer rectangular area in Terror Bay. The area runs from point E to point F to point G to point H. In August 2019, taking advantage of exceptionally cooperative weather conditions, Parks Canada conducted 48 dives over the course of 7 days to Terror, 3D mapping the wreck and searching the interior with ROVs. The team was able to map out 90% of Terror's lower deck, but were unable to access Crozier's cabin due to the buildup of sediment. Despite this, Crozier's cabin was considered the best preserved space in the lower deck, and Parks Canada has expressed the hope that written materials may be found there. The planned exploration of the wreck sites in 2020 was cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Parks Canada's underwater archaeology team returned to the wrecks in May 2022 after a 2-year postponement caused by the pandemic. Legacy. In art, entertainment, and media, HMS Terror is featured often alongside HMS Erebus in fictional works that involve or allude to the Franklin expedition, such as Northwest Passage is a 1981 song by Canadian musician Stan Rogers about the Franklin expedition and its fate. Terror and Erebus is a verse play for CBC Radio by Canadian poet Gwendolyn McEwen, subsequently published in her collection Afterworlds. Mordecai Rickler's novel Solomon Gursky Was Here, 1989, in which Ephraim Gursky survives the expedition and lives to pass on his Judaism and Yiddish to some of the local Inuit. Dan Simmons' novel The Terror, 2007, a fictionalized account of Captain Sir John Franklin's lost expedition of HMS Erebus and HMS Terror to the Arctic in 1845 to 1848 to force the Northwest Passage. In the novel, while Franklin and his crew are plagued by starvation and illness, and forced to contend with mutiny and cannibalism, they are stalked across the bleak Arctic landscape by a monster. The novel has been adapted as an eponymous 2018 television series by cable TV channel AMC. The Erebus and the Terror, an instrumental piece composed by Michael O'Domhnaill, is the third track on the 1987 album Something of Time by Night Noise. Erebus, The Story of a Ship, 2018, by Michael Palin, is a historical account of the ship Erebus and Terror. The book was serialized on BBC Radio 4 in 2018. In namesakes, Mount Terror on Ross Island near Antarctica was named after the ship by Captain Ross, who also named a nearby and slightly taller peak to the west, Mount Erebus. Erebus and Terror Gulf in Antarctica named after the vessels used by Royal Navy Captain Sir James Clark Ross in exploring the area in 1842-43. Terror Bay on King William Island was named in 1910, long before the discovery of the wreck there. Terror Roops, an escarpment on Mercury. Terror Street in the suburb of Keeler Park in Melbourne, Australia. Books. Erebus, The Story of a Ship. Michael Palin, London, Hutchinson. See also European and American voyages of scientific exploration. List of bomb vessels of the Royal Navy. All right. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to hit that thumbs up. Also, make sure you're subscribed for future videos. And as always, put a comment down below of what article you'd like to see next. Thanks.